Coding drop-in flippy thing starts today from 2 to 4 p.m. Uh, actually, does it start today? It says the week of March 17th. Today's a Monday. Whatever, starts this week in this little lobby area out here. So I encourage you to check that out if you are working on anything and take advantage of that, because if that ends up being something that's helpful, then we can invest in it and keep it going. All right. So outside of that, let's get back to our program here. We were working on our mini map last time. Go ahead. I have no idea about that event. I saw you post. Yeah, I would say it's an Aiden Schneider direct question. Well, send him an email. That's a good way of getting a hold of somebody directly. So, but I know nothing of that stuff, so whatever. That's the scoop. Okay, so last time we were working on our mini map and we were put together kind of a conglomeration of solutions, and I mentioned I wanted to implement one of the solutions today, but at the end of class last time I was filling in the last couple of lines after class was over. We have one working solution, so let's review that a little bit. So let me just start this, make sure it still is running. Right, I'm just kind of zipping all over the place, and we're seeing that we're not ending up with extra rooms, that we're not duplicating those rooms over on the left. They were only getting created once. All right, so let's go and review kind of how we got to that point. So I'll go into my scripts folder. That can open up. Okay, that's just my room manager. The rest of them going to be listed here. There's core, there's dungeon, there's exit, there's player, there's room. All right. So I think it was in Room Manager where I was writing this code inside of update. All right, so inside of update, this is the logic that we had put in last time. I just finished out the statements for the other directions. If they hit the up arrow, that means they want to go north. So we get the current room, we try to take the exit to the north. That either puts them into that. So remember, this is something from the room class where we try to place them into a room, try to take exit. We search for an exit in that direction. As long as the exit exists, we actually remove them from the current room. We put them in the destination room, and then we return true that yes, they moved. Otherwise, we return false. Yeah, we do. When we say remove player from the current room, right here. All right, so after they try to take the exit, if the exit exists, we actually do the switcheroo, take them out of the current room, put them into the next room. Done. But then the important piece here is this guy's now returning true, letting whoever called this know player has moved, player changed rooms. We successfully took the exit. If for whatever reason we couldn't take the exit, which would primarily be we could not find an exit with that direction in our list of exits, then we'll return false, give a little output saying no exit in that direction. But more importantly, it returns false. So that's this call right here, where we get the current room from the player. We try to take the exit to the north since they hit the up arrow. We receive whether or not they change rooms. So if it returned true that they took the exit, room has changed. If it returned false, they haven't. So now we conditionally do something if the room has changed. So if did change room is true, then we're going to go ahead and update the mini map pause on Z by 1.2 from wherever they are now. The very least, that room needs to be 1.2 F on Z, different from where it's at now. This doesn't imply whether or not we actually take it or create it or not, but that's where we're about to go. All right, so now we keep track of, we have this function we've written inside of core. So let me open that up, called has been to room. So here's core. Has been to room, takes in the name of the room. We talked about this a little last time, that this current implementation relies on us making sure we name our rooms unique names. Otherwise, things are going to get a little wonky pretty quick. And as your dungeon gets very big, that's difficult to debug. That's not coming from experience, of course. Go ahead.
If instead of using like a string array or string list, what if you use like just a room list, so it just tracks you through?
We could do that, and I think effectively that's where we're going today. If I remember correctly, you had suggested, what if we just tell the room, if the room keeps track of whether it's been visited or not? So then we don't have to keep track of a list. Well, we could just say, room, has somebody been here before? If the answer is yes, we probably created a mini map room. So that's what we're going to be updating this to today. But yeah, I mean, but effectively, your point was, at the very least, we know rooms have unique memory addresses. So if they have unique memory addresses, we're not reliant on the programmer having named their rooms unique strings, which right now we know we did, so we're okay with our current solution, but that is the thing. So we asked the question of core, have we been to a certain room? Inside of core, we're keeping track of something called room names. This guy right here, which is just a list of strings for our name, where your update would be, it would be a list of rooms instead of a list of strings. It would be the identical solution, except we'd just be asking if the pointers are the same rather than the strings are the same. All right, but last time we did kind of draw a connection to some of our knowledge from Java, where we said, hey, in Java, we had something that was maybe a better tool for this than an array, since arrays have the limitation of we have to know how many things are going into the array when we first create it. So we had referenced back to the idea when in Java, we had looked at this thing called an array list, which under the hood is still built using memory inefficient arrays, but at the very least for us, it did all the work of, you would add one more thing here, no problem, we'll do it. Don't worry about how we did it. I'm pretty certain, if I remember correctly, after we looked at this, I had decided that the list data structure in C# was likely a linked list type data structure instead of an array-based thing. Not important for us in here at all. Still functions the same. It is elastic. We can add and remove stuff from it at our will, and it will just work. And we don't care about the memory footprint behind the scenes. All right, so we created this list of strings using generics, just like we did in Java. And this guy is empty initially. When we went to a room, well, I think when we built those rooms, we added the rooms to that list. So in that list, we had a room. Actually, this would have been as we visited them. So as we visited a room, we added the room name to that list. So this guy at any point in time holds the names of all the rooms we've been to. So down here, we can ask, have we been to the room? Give the name of the room. We ask that list, do you already contain this string? If the answer is true, we don't do anything new. The answer is false, we actually do add it to that list. All right. And then we return in either case, whatever the answer was. So one way or another, that room is getting added to this list. Or it's already in that list. We just find out whether it had already been in the list or not. That's why we're returning either true or false, the result of whether it was already there. If it wasn't already there, that then tells whoever called this guy, we need to go ahead and actually create that mini map room because we haven't been here before. So that's back here in Room Manager. If we did change rooms, figure out where the new thing needs to be, then ask if we had not previously been to that room. That's what that if statement says. Call cores has been to room, passing it the name of the room we're currently in. Find out if we've not been there, if that's equal to false. If we have not previously been there, then we need to actually generate a brand new version of a mini map room from our prefab and then put its position at the location of where we currently should be. Right. So remember, we kept track of our Kerpause. Somewhere up here, we started with the starting point for that very first room, and we just kept changing that depending on where we were, making sure we updated any new rooms we created to the correct location where they're supposed to live. So that's what we're doing right here. So only under the circumstance that we had to just create a brand new mini map room did we tell that guy where he lives so he positions himself correctly on the screen. We won't do that if we've already been to that room because he's already positioned correctly on the screen and he already exists. All right, so this is for going to the north. You'll see that we have the same logic for the west and the east and the south. The only thing that changes is how we're updating either the position on Z or the position on X for east and west. All right, so this allows us to build out our mini map, not creating more rooms at once. So questions about that as a starting point, because I know right at the end of class last time, I think we had either the first or the first two little if structures built in here, and then I just filled out the rest, updating the right things. The logic that we just went through is the same. All right. So the idea that came up last time, and we just kind of talked about a few minutes ago, was is there a better way? Now, because we built this dungeon, we can sit here and say, this is good enough. We'll just make sure we always have our rooms have unique names. Frankly, that's not the end of the world, but it does open up kind of that little problem thing if we come back to this in 6 months and forget that had to happen or whatever, or we start creating abilities to have like a JSON document, which is where we're going for defining our dungeon beforehand. If you hang up on the telemarketers too quickly, they call right back thinking that I should have delayed it. We make ourselves error prone. So I would say good programming practice is to write the code with some level of future proofing in the mind, but don't over engineer it. You don't have to have 4,000 different error checking things in there when so many of them are going to be things that just never happen. Right. But this is one of those things that, hey, if we're going to be reading in a format for our dungeon, like how our map should look instead of hard coding it into our dungeon constructor like we have right now, somebody else might be defining that dungeon and maybe they have more than one room with the same name. Could happen. All right, so that's where we have to start getting down into maybe instances of rooms like it was suggested here. Maybe instead of keeping track of the names, we keep track of the memory addresses. But let's really focus on this more from an object-oriented perspective. Since we're already managing what room is the player in, we're already doing that. What we can do is we can rely on the rooms to keep track of, has the player been here before? Right? So let's just start with that concept. Before we figure out the rest of the logic, we could just say, you know what? It might be helpful for a room to know whether it's had a player in it before. And that should be a pretty easy bolt on, right? Just go to room. We'll add another private field up here. Maybe private bool has player been here. We can start that guy off at false initially, or you can put it to false inside of the constructor. Probably that's the more correct implementation, even though it looks like Copilot doesn't believe that. So we'll say has player been here equal to false inside of our constructor. That's the appropriate place to put it. When a room is born, you set all the initial fields for that room. All right. One way or another, when a room is first born, the room has said, I've never seen a player. So only when a player is added to this room, So when we go down, let me just start minimizing some of this stuff. Oh, Ninja. All right, so right here in set player. So whenever set player gets called, at that point in time, at the very least, whether it's the first time or the 10th time the player has entered this room, that player has been put into this room. Now, we could just say, well, whether it's the first time or the 10th time, we're going to go ahead and say the player has been here is equal to true. Copilot got that one right. All right. We could always just say that. Um, we could ask the question, have you been set before? You know, if you're already true, don't set yourself to true. Otherwise, set it to true. I would say this is probably best practices. Just set it to the Boolean rather than asking extra questions. One thing to kind of keep in mind when we start thinking about code optimization, which, as we've talked about before, isn't always forefront in our minds as a modern day programmer because we have lots of resources. We have tons of RAM and CPU power and things like that. We're not playing the game old style developers used to have to play because they were working with very minimal resources. Although as I've been mentioning more recently, we're almost starting to play that game again with using some of these AI models that take up a ton of space. I've been doing a whole lot of stuff with AI recently, and I've run out of the 128 gigs of RAM on this machine multiple times. Usually it's when I'm trying to upscale an image that it started off way too large. Like I tried to take a 4K image and my program upscales it by 8 times. So now you have a 24K image you're trying to do. That's a lot of pixels that you're keeping track of. And say this again. Yeah, but I'm saying 4K. So that's 4,096 by 4,096 would be a square 4K image. And if I'm multiplying that by 8, an upscale of 8 times, the reason this program exists in the first place, it's related to computer science. We'll just go with it. Well, the reason this program exists in the first place, if you've ever gone on to like any of these AI models like ChatGPT and say, create an image that does that looks like this, it creates a 1K image for you, right? So 1024 by 1024 square. Now, if you want to put that on a billboard, let's say, or a t-shirt, you want to blow it up a little bit, like some of my new custom Ninja Turtle t-shirts. You want to blow that up a little bit, it gets very pixelated, right? Taking 1024 and just making it 4 times the size. So this program that I wrote, and I'm using somebody else's pre-trained AI model. It's not like I invented this model. It's something off of Hugging Face's AI model thing, but it's what it does is it takes an image in as an input and it upscales that image 8 times from whatever its current resolution is. There's also a 4 times model, but bigger is better, right? So you don't need 32K pixels, but having an 8K image, I think, is pretty viable today. So if I could take a 1K image and turn it into an 8K image, that allows me to get something pretty big to the point that it's not going to get pixelated. And what's really cool about the AI model, and again, I didn't create the model. I'm just using somebody else's model. I'd love to take credit for it, but I'm not the one who created it. Is in many cases, it makes the picture better than it was before. Because it's using predictive AI to determine what color the 8 pixels around the single pixel should be based on the rest of the image. Kind of a cool thing. But in any case, when I have accidentally fed it a 4K image, and then I realize it's taking a while for this thing to load, and then I start noticing that my mouse starts getting very sluggish. And I have this little thing up top here. It's not showing right now, but I have because I think it's pushed off the screen, but I have a thing that shows me how much available RAM I have. And when that thing starts getting into single digits, I know we're in trouble. More RAM. But what's fun, the point of this whole conversation is we're almost, because of these AI model stuff, we're returning to a time period where our idea of having roughly unlimited resources, let's say, isn't as much of a reality today as it used to be, right? And as easy as it is to take, I mean, there's a million people out there working on AI models. So if you go to, there's a website called Hugging Face, I think it's huggingface.co. It's one of the sites that, it's a weird name, I get it, but it's a site that brings together a whole bunch of people's different AI models that they're working on. It's got the big boy ones from Google and Meta, and then it has, Bob's AI model that does some kind of computer vision thing. They're just fun to play with. But the point is, you got a lot of people working on things like that, and there's some really cool tools out there you can create without that much trouble. Most of you in here already have the skill set to use some of these models. They're not difficult to use. You just got to plug them in at the right level, but very quickly you can start running out of resources. Several of those models would never run on a computer that has 16 gigs of RAM, for example. Wouldn't even start. You just run out of RAM right away. Where that's not something that's happened in a long, long, long time, where even a decent laptop, a decent laptop today has 16 gigs of RAM, right? That's not like a budget pleaser. It's a decent laptop, and you can't run a program because you don't have the resources. It's kind of fun. We're returning to this time where, as programmers, we might need to care about this kind of stuff. Um, so in any case, that tangent came from, should I ask an extra if statement here? It is related, trust me. Every time we ask an if statement, that effectively, we can think of if statements as effectively speed bumps in our programs. Anytime we ask a question, we are effectively slowing down our execution of our program. Most of the time, we're not going to notice it, but if you have something where you're asking an if statement, every single frame in Unity, you might start feeling that. Okay, remember, these frames on an average game, you might be running at 60 frames a second. That means 60 times every second, you're running every one of those if statements. We have to think a little bit differently than we used to think. All right. So my argument here would be, don't wrap this as an if statement. If it's already true, just set it to true again. It's not going to hurt anybody. All right. So whenever we set the player in a room, we'll go ahead and mark that a player has been here, whether it's the first time or the 10th time, it doesn't really matter, but they've been here. So now we've taught rooms how to know whether a player has visited here or not. Now we don't have to go to core. We can just ask, the room we just went to, has a player been there before? Now, let's go down the path and run into our bug and then come up with how we can bypass this bug. So what we might say here, let's just update the north code first. Got our up arrow. We tried to go to the north. It tells us whether we successfully made it there or not. If we did make it there, we're still going to update where our new thing should be. But then we get to this question right here. This question is our magical question that says, do I need to create another prefab or not? Well, I could say if, I didn't even look, what was he going to write? Oh, no, he was right. He was right. He was right in the old bad code. So I'm going to go ahead and get the current room. So that's the current room the player's in. Now we want to get the value of whether or not we visited there. Now, right now, that's a private variable. So we have this private variable has been here. We'll go ahead and just give ourselves a public get has. You're not going to fix it for me now? I know. I wanted to fix it now. I've become I've become reliant. Let's see. Get has player been here? And we'll return that variable. And this guy is a I'm not sure it did a great job of such a simple thing there. So again, don't trust AI that far. So we've given ourselves a getter for this private field. So going back into here, we can say dot has player been here. And I know that's a function. So now AI is ticking me off again. If the player has not already been there, then we want to do this stuff. Go ahead. Okay, so she's asking about this line right here. When we create a new game object, so let's just make the alternate here. We'll call this new room. We'll just do the same thing. It goes new game object, whatever. So up to this point, when we have our own objects and we create instances of those objects, we always use the new keyword. We're asking for new memory, right? And so the short answer, her question was, what's the difference between instantiate and new? Under the hood, nothing, except this is part of all modern object-oriented programming languages. This is a Unity specific thing that says, hi, I'm a function. I know how to create prefabs for you. Under the hood, it's creating a new memory address. The new keyword is somewhere in there. But at the end of the day, the equivalent stuff is happening. But in this case, we have this prefab thing that we want Unity to magically just give us a copy of that guy. Yeah. Sure, but we actually could tell one of our objects to clone themselves. We can work around it. This is just a Unity specific thing. So we can just say in Unity, if you want to create an instance of a prefab, you use their built-in instantiate function. This is not a programming concept as much as it is just a feature of Unity. Because the other thing you could do is you could do something like this dot room prefab dot, sure, it's got a clone. There we go. That'll accomplish we have two variables with the same name, but that'll accomplish the same thing. That says take an existing object, clone it, and then now we have two different memory addresses. I say it does the same thing, but it's possible this won't actually get it into our scene. Because that's a Unity secret sauce type thing potentially, but it exists twice. The other one was in the scene, so I think this would be in the scene. Then we can just update the clones transform and have it in this new location. I don't recommend this, but this is us playing with the memory ourselves rather than just relying on Unity's functions. Not if we're calling new.
But this clone does assign it to
Well, the clone takes the existing prefab and copies all the stuff in memory from where it currently is to a new memory location. But you're still creating a new object. You're still, a new object equals use more memory. Well, either way. If a new object's going to exist, whether you got to it through instantiate, you got to it through a new keyword, or you got to it through clone, an addition of more memory now exists. Clone copies memory and just puts it in a new place. So if you had one house and you clone that house, you now have two houses. Well, but it is the same thing. If we create a clone, so here, this is new room 2, let's say, something like that. If this guy right here will be a instance of that prefab that lives at some memory address in our computer's memory. This guy right here will also be an instance of that prefab built by cloning the original, duplicating that memory. So now you have two different game objects that live in identical places. This isn't the preferred way to do it through Unity. This is us just leveraging a modern object-oriented programming language that has taken away our ability to use pointers. Well, we're getting the same thing. You might as well use Unity's tools to allow them to accomplish anything extra that might occur. Like I asked the question a minute ago, if we clone it, is this new thing actually ending up in the scene? Maybe not. You know, there's Unity has built this giant application. Unity is not a programming language. It's this running application that they wrote. And the mechanism by which they decided to implement their scene isn't under our control. So creating our own clone of an existing object might not have hit all the little check boxes that Unity has intended to be hit, because all we've done is taking something that already exists and just spoofing it, making it or duplicating it. And now we have a second copy of the same thing, but it's in a different memory location. But we don't know which check boxes we may not have hit to get that guy in there. So in order to do things the Unity way and make sure all those check boxes get hit, we should use Instantiate, which is a Unity tool, not a programming language thing, because this creates a new prefab. All right, I'm going to leave that at that because we don't need to kill a dead horse there. So anyways, getting back to this concept here, we can ask the room we're currently in. So instead of asking core whether or not we've been to a room with the same name, like we were doing before, we can ask the room we're currently in, have we been there before? Why is this going to be a problem as of right now? I'll go back to rooms so you can remember when we set that. We set that in set player. So has player been here before gets set right there. Back out here, we're asking, this is only if we successfully change rooms. We're asking, why is that always going to fail? As we currently have it written, we get rid of that line. We will never, ever get to these lines of code. Why is that? Go ahead.
Try to take the exit if it's possible. We take the new room, which means we set the player in that room.
Yep. So because where am I in the room? When we try to take the exit, as he was saying, assuming there was an exit, we ultimately remove the player from the current room and then set them into their new room. That's where the player has changed rooms. We let the player know about the room they're currently in, but we also are changing that variable right here. So at no point in time have we had the opportunity to ask, have we created you before? So really, we do not want to do it there in set player. We want to do it as a response to us checking, have we been here before? Go ahead. But he's removed as part of that try to take exit. Yeah, so we and actually putting it in remove, if you're saying when we remove him from a room, you want to set, have we been here in the previous one? Or I think what you're saying could work. So you're saying don't actually mark the room they're currently in as being a room they visited before until they leave that room. Yeah, you could do it there. So what he wants to do is when they leave that room, we can then say, has player been there is equal to true. Well, I mean, we're talking through a lot of logic here. So in this case, when we try to take the exit, which is in core, is it in core? No, it's in room. Try to take exit right here. When we try to take exit, we find the exit, we try to take it, we remove the player from the room they're currently in, which by your logic would say at that point in time, we will mark that room as having been visited. So presumably the mini map thing has already been created. Yeah, this would work. Then we put them into the destination room, which would not mark it as having been visited yet. So back out in here, when we ask the question, did we change rooms? If so, has the player been there yet? It has not been marked to true because they haven't actually left that room yet.
That the current room isn't rendered on the mini map until we leave it.
No, it'll get rendered right here when we just entered it. Huh? Yeah. This is where it comes into existence on the mini map right here.
Pretty much that you've been at this room after you have left.
Yeah, but that means that it wouldn't appear until after you left.
No, because this is when it's appearing. This if statement right here. We just hit the up arrow trying to go north. We tried to take the exit to the north. It did happen. Let's say we did make that exit. We update the location where we should be. Then we ask the question, is the room we're currently in, which is the room we just went to, has that been visited before? It will still be false because we have not left that room yet. Yeah, right here, the not. So this, in this case, will render it. So what we can do is we can replace all of our if statements here with this updated if statement with his solution of only setting whether a player has been in the room upon them leaving that room. So the very first time it goes ahead and creates the mini map for them.
There did not update the map with the term.
When you correct, when you return to the room has been there would be true again. All right, so there is our 4 if statements. So let's go back, run this guy again. Now remember, what we're testing right here is his solution to say, let's set when a player leaves a room, when a player is removed from a room, at that point in time, we'll mark the room as having been visited, which happens well after we've had the opportunity to create the mini map room. Go ahead and run this. All right, so I'm going east, west over and over again. We're seeing no new rooms are being created. Yep, so this looks like it is working, which then would allow us to go ahead and say, well, maybe it doesn't make a ton of sense for us to keep track of this arbitrary list of room names. So we'll go ahead and get rid of that. We no longer have to add room names to this, so we'll go ahead and get rid of that. We no longer are going to ask this guy whether or not we've been to the room, because now we just ask the room directly. Have you been visited before? So we've re-simplified our core. We're still going to use core to keep track of where in the world we should be right now, something along those lines. Go back out here. Let's see if this guy screams, which means we were still calling those functions somewhere. I think I took them out. Okay, there's our entire dungeon, and extra rooms are not being created. I think this is actually a pretty good solution. I think the marking it as we exit makes decent sense. So I would call this a good solution. I'm not sure we need to have a better one to this. So in our final minute here, what's the next feature we should add? What do we want to see our game be able to do next? What? You got that? Who? You want a monster? You want to fight a monster? Okay. So we'll come back. We will have if you remember back from the original Final Fantasy games, you would go wander around until that's how you power level. So you finally hit a monster and then you go and fight them. So maybe we can have there just be a random chance that you run into a monster when you enter a room. And if that happens, then it's going to take us to a new scene, which is our fight scene. If you remember how Final Fantasy worked, when you ran into a monster, it took you to a new scene that had your dudes over on the right and the monsters on the left, and you did your turn-based thing. Go ahead. Do what kind of encounters? Yeah, we can put the enemy there. I mean, we'll just decide whether or not they randomly should be there or not. So if we decide that there is an enemy in this room, we will see them in that room. We could always put the option whether or not we want to run or attack. But we would physically see them in the room. But let's get them. Let's decide if a battle starts up. We'll see how we can create a new scene, all that stuff. All right. So this is effectively us integrating our old code from Deathmatch into our game. All right. I'll see everybody on Wednesday. Oh no, I get it.
Way to get how putting it step the player doesn't work. I kind of missed that.
Oh.